Zach, thank you so much for joining us today. I know this is your first time on Defender Fridays. We've had you on other webinars before, but you're going to feel right at home here because Defender Fridays is very much the same format that you've known from us before. Very casual, fireside chat. We just want to, engage in some interesting dialogue around defensive concepts, whether that's endpoint security, cloud security. We've even got offensive topics, from time to time. But I know that not only have you been extensively involved with osquery pretty much from its infancy. I mean, all the way back to the days of Collide. You were a co-founder of Collide, which was an amazing platform. I mean, I still feel I still remember the joy of using that UI. It was just such a pretty UI, but really the power of it was the usage of osquery for endpoint visibility. And folks, for anybody here that doesn't know what osquery is, open source agent was originally made by the folks over at Facebook. It's got a new home, right, Zach? It's now under the Linux Foundation, but it was truly one of the most unique agents of its kind, in that it was effectively a read-only agent. So this isn't like EDR or anything like that. What it is just a very, very lightweight agent that would allow you to interrogate endpoints as if they were databases, which was such a cool concept. You could ask a question like, show me this location of the registry or these running processes or what have you, just like in SQL syntax. And I think a lot of folks appreciated that by the charter of the project, this thing could not like shell out. It could not run code. So it was not an additional attack surface on your endpoint that could get hijacked and abused for evil. But it provided really awesome insights. But I know that project's been through a lot. And Zach, I know you've actually been through a lot as well because you were with Collide, but now you are the co-founder behind Fleet, which is basically a new sort of management tool interface for osquery. I'd love to hear a little bit about it, but I'd also just love to pick your brain, man, on all around like endpoint security. Obviously, that's where the battle's being fought these days. So, Zach, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Defender Fridays.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on, Eric. And it was great to see you and Whitney in person at the conference. As folks know, RSA is not, it doesn't tend to be the friendliest. It's a bit of the anonymous conference. So it is cool to see the old friends and connections out there. So that was really awesome. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on. And let's see. I mean, I think you nailed a lot of the background there. I'll just state it explicitly that when, I was also at Facebook in 2014 when we created osquery in the first place and when we open sourced it. And the goals really were, number one, we needed something for telemetry on Mac and Linux, because especially if you look back 10 years, there was basically nothing, especially nothing cross-platform across those. And we added Windows about 2 years later, and now the philosophy is really like, let's cover every major computing platform from both workstation and server perspectives. And then I think your other question was about Fleet and kind of where I've gone with that since then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So for me, it's been in these 10 years, I went from Facebook, not actually that long at Facebook, to consulting on osquery, where I helped build some of the features that brought it to Airbnb, and that ended up becoming a reason for why like Stream Alert was able to pull in a bunch of logs, and you can kind of follow that thread further along to Jack Naglieri going and building Panther, which is something that a lot of folks are using these days for detections. Or with my thread, I helped co-found Collide, where we built originally what became Fleet, a little admin user interface for managing osquery agents. And then we pivoted, open source that, did some other stuff, and I parted ways with that company, but really was drawn back into the open source osquery Fleet Manager, and continued working on Fleet, that same code base, and eventually had a very cool opportunity to turn it into an open core company. So that's where we're at now. There's a huge amount of functionality that's just there for free, open source, do whatever you want with it, integrate it, and use it to serve your customers, as well as some like premium features that we throw on top of that. And what we really try to focus on at Fleet these days is not just getting access to the raw capabilities of osquery as an agent, but how to start to do slightly higher level stuff. So with queries, we have almost 300 different tables we can access across the Mac, Linux, and Windows platforms. And with queries, we figured out we can do things like we can automatically run a query that pulls the whole software inventory off of the machine. And then on the Fleet server, we can start to correlate with vulnerabilities and do vulnerability detection and become sort of a building block of a vulnerability management program in that way. And we figured out that we can be really useful to like GRC type teams because we have a feature called policies that allows us to take the queries and just run them to determine when a device is in and out of compliance with policies, and then to fire off to webhooks or ticketing systems for that kind of thing. And then there's the more traditional sort of threat detection and incident response use cases of like, I need to know something right now. Let's run a live query and get the data off the endpoint. And there's, of course, the feeding a bunch of data into a SIM. osquery can do everything from the real basics, like just list an enumeration of the processes that are running at a point in time, up to process auditing, where we're getting every process that ever executes, up to socket auditing with every network socket that's open and closed, and then file integrity monitoring kind of use cases. So it goes through like a whole range of stuff.
I love it. I love it. I gotta do a quick shameless plug. So Whitney and I, back when we were really hot and heavy with osquery, one of the things that we felt like was missing was kind of like a public repository of kind of hunt focused queries, right? And now, while I'll admit this project is old and unmaintained, so the link I dropped in the Slack just there, Recon Hunt queries, it was kind of just a dumping ground that we would put osquery queries that focused on hunting for specific tactics, right? So if you're looking for persistence or any different types of threat actor activity, and we kind of broke it down by the MITRE tactics, credential access, all that good stuff. So I'm sure there's actually probably significantly better repositories out there than that now, because we kind of this one's become a bit stale. But again, if you're just looking for some inspiration on things that you could do with osquery, that's one place to start. And I know Zach, do you know of any other more up to date, more comprehensive repos for folks that want to like get up to speed with what it can do?
Yes, let me see. Let me tip tap in the background here on Slack because I know we were just talking this internally the other day. But your repo there does still make our list for sure. So
Oh, sweet.
I think most of those queries are not dated. Would love to see you contributing more actively, but hey, we know that priorities are shifting.
Yeah, I think I just need to dust off osquery and see. Has there been any big changes in the agent itself? Because full disclosure, I probably haven't put hands on it in about 2 or 3 years. So has there been any big improvements or changes that I and other folks might appreciate knowing about?
In terms of big changes, like if it's been 3 or 4 years, there's now on Linux eBPF based tables for socket and process auditing, which have replaced the old audit framework based tables.
Nice.
And it depends on the system, but are often getting better performance, but also eliminating some of the issues that folks had with audit subsystem, like wanting to be able to run audit D alongside. That wasn't something you could do with osquery. As well as I think just kind of moving to more modernized technology and getting osquery more ready for eBPF. And in particular, better container support as well by heading that direction. There's also, throughout a number of tables, there's been support added for namespaces. So again, thinking about Linux and containers and how containers use namespaces for process isolation. A number of tables now have namespace support, which makes it much easier to kind of introspect what's going on inside of a container by effectively having the table switch into the container context before it enumerates whatever information that is.
Yeah, Joshua in chat's been talking about the power behind using tables in osquery, and I absolutely agree. Like, and it's fairly simple to figure out because it's SQL based, and so that allows you to kind of join different tables together to provide relevant context of, yeah, show me processes alongside network sockets and link together, just get a more complete picture of what's going on. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do with that agent. So as I understand it, osquery by itself is pretty powerful, but like the challenge is managing it at scale, right? Which is where tools like, Collide originally, but now Fleet probably being the premier one that I know about. I don't know if there's really any others that are exclusively drilling into that. So with Fleet, you say that kind of brings in the ability to then automate like outbound webhooks and things like that. Does Fleet add any capability to take actions on the endpoint, or are we still kind of a hands-off approach as osquery intended to be?
Fleet is starting to go that direction, and we're not going. And I see John Woodling in chat asked about turning this into a more EDR type product. And I would say we're not trying to do EDR now, but something that we have heard a lot from our users is, you make it really easy to see whether computers are out of compliance with policies. And then when we want to go remediate those policies, there's no answer in here for how to do that. So something that we have added recently is fairly basic script execution features. As we all know, with script execution, you can do basically anything. So also great power, great responsibility, lots of considerations to have there. That's kind of an optional feature, and the read-only aspect of osquery was often a big selling point, especially when you wanted to just step into organizations and say, hey, deploy this random piece of open source software to 300,000 endpoints. But I think it's getting easier to convince folks that we know what we're doing and they want to see those types of features. We're also on the sort of more active management and right side, taking in the more IT focused direction than the security focused direction at the moment, where we're looking at MDM. We now support the MDM protocols on Mac and Windows, and with script execution on Linux, you can do some MDM like stuff. Of course, it's not like baked into the OS itself, but you can start to do a lot of the things that you want to do with MDM there. And so that means a lot of remediation of sort of the basic configurations, firewall on, screen lock, and that kind of stuff. And then the big one that we're working on, especially because we already have vulnerability detection, is software management and patching, which means we don't just show you that you have vulnerabilities and now you have to go off on your own and figure out how to deal with them, but we can help patch them as well. So I think someday Fleet might kind of move into the EDR space, but it's not a priority here. Like, we really see that there's so much to be done in kind of like integrating the IT and the security. And that's really often where we see really big wins within organizations, is like one of those teams, we start talking with an IT team, and then they bring in the security team, and the security team's like, wow, this is an amazing new capability that you brought us. Like, we're so happy that you did that, or other way around. So it's very cool to see that. And we're not going, you can go down the hardcore security route with Fleet, but you're probably going to do that by writing a lot of your own queries, writing detections in your SIM, and kind of bringing your own skills and using the more integratable features of the product to get the data from the devices to wherever you want to do your hardcore security workloads.
No doubt, no doubt. So I have a couple of thoughts actually. So I feel like one immediate use case, you mentioned you guys were thinking more like IT centric, right? I think one awesome use case comes to mind is like using it to kind of populate CMDB, right? Because you're able to gather all the information on an endpoint in a pretty lightweight, low impact way, and it's already kind of database structure, right? And so that's one interesting. One thing I'm curious about, and just because I'm out of touch, has osquery implemented any sort of real-time eventing features or capabilities, like kind of streaming what's going on an endpoint versus like a point-in-time query?
Yes. So osquery kind of has a hybrid model. There are all these tables that are collecting all the events as they come through, but still when you end up shipping those, you would end up shipping a batch of events every 5 seconds or something.
Got it.
So in all the use cases that I've ever really seen for folks, like 5 seconds is going to be trivial relative to what the rest of their detection pipeline looks like. So this is totally fine. But I'm not talking. We're not talking point in time snapshots every 5 seconds. We're talking about collect up everything and then 5 seconds shoot it all up, and then
Got it.
collect up everything 5 seconds shoot it all up. So that's there for a lot of stuff. Things like attaching and detaching USB devices and other kinds of hardware for processes and socket connections, and a bunch of other stuff like that. We just added another notable thing is we just added, that's been there on Mac and Linux for quite a while. We just added support for that using Windows ETW, event tracing for Windows. We
Nice.
added support for the Windows process events, essentially, so you can do full process auditing. And in the meantime, kind of built a little mini library for getting ETW logs into osquery tables. So there's much more headroom kind of opened up there to get
Yeah.
more into the event-based tables on Windows, especially when you look at how rich the data sources are in ETW. I mean, I don't know if ETW is something that you're using in Lima Charlie. I see a lot of head nodding here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, ETW is kind of the de facto source of truth for the deep granular, events on a system. So yeah, that's awesome. How about Mac? Are you guys dabbling with the Mac Unified Logs yet?
Yes. So unified logs you can get at by an osquery table that essentially searches the unified logs and allows you to like put predicates in through your SQL. So that's how unified logs would work. And then the other newer stuff, in the last 3-4 years on Mac OS is endpoint security. So now endpoint security framework, and now things like our process auditing and socket auditing have moved from the older forms. I can't remember exactly the moment how those are implemented, and now all the newer stuff is being implemented using those endpoint security libraries.
Yeah. Oh, Jeff, I see your chat there. Yeah, you might be correct. I mean, well, kernel hooks are still possible. It's just there's a really high bar to clear, right? Sign drivers. Um, but yeah, ETW is the next best way. But there's flaws with ETW too, right? Because we've seen that those traces can be suspended and all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah,
But
no, like
yeah,
it's all code versus code. There is no you will always win if you do this thing for detection.
right.
It's always spy versus spy, and whoever moves last has some advantage of winning. But attackers don't know where the landmines are, whether that's your disabled admin account or ETW or the friggin' process name or process argument. Like attackers don't know that it's the argument of Kerberost that got them caught. They just know they were caught.
Indeed, indeed. And I had one other thought. Oh yeah, Zach, but I love the way you were describing. So the way you guys are working with the Mac Unified Logs. So the unified logs are phenomenal, but there's a double-edged sword there. They're phenomenal because they're extremely verbose, right? Like, but they're stored in that super optimized format on the disk. So like they're compressed, but like they're actually massive, and they're just incredibly noisy. And so I'm actually a bigger fan of sort of the point in time interrogation approach using the predicate. Like just look for the thing that you specifically need, because I don't personally think it makes sense to stream unified logs just in their entirety. Like that's the quickest way I think to overwhelm the data lake or the seam or the whatever. And so really, really clever to just implement it as a targeted query against the logs where they sit. I think that makes good sense.
Yeah, that's definitely more what we're seeing from folks. And you can write queries to the unified log that take a long time to run. Like, it's easy to prove that just by using their shell command to do that searching. But often we can find a lot of good use cases that have a pretty reasonable performance. Okay, I also wanted to address M. Cohen says, how's things about osquery's future with the foundation? So I think the foundation is looking pretty stable. Like we've been, the osquery has been part of the Linux Foundation now for since 2019, I believe. So that's about 5 years. And to my understanding, they're happy with us. We have a pretty quiet relationship with them. It's primarily sort of they enable us to receive donations and to work with organizations like Apple, who insist that you are an organization, so that, we use their tax number to prove to Apple that we're a legitimate identity. But mostly we kind of self-operate within their umbrella of projects.
Outstanding. So Zach, just out of curiosity, so today, what would be the easiest way for somebody, even if they're just tinkering around in a home lab, to spin up and get some instant value out of osquery, just to kind of get some experience, some exposure to it? I think you mentioned Fleet has the open source version. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So Fleet is okay. So screen sharing is disabled here. So I'll just talk about it, and I'll link to our website.
No. I'll pop it over to you. Here, hang on a second.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, go right on ahead.
Oh, that was already on my homepage. That is handy. So yeah, so here's the Fleet homepage, and you'll see on the pricing chart here, free is like really free, unlimited hosts. You don't get all the features, but we're talking like it's MIT licensed. You can read the code, modify it, change it, use it for commercial purposes, whatever you want. And then there's some premium features on top, but a lot of what's there you get really for free. The easiest way to do this is, I believe, for free, you just go to the docs and you'd go to. I've found deploying Fleet on Render actually recently is very, very easy. In fact, there's a. Let's see, it's actually one of our employees put it in their own repo. Edwards B/feed on Render. This is like you could seriously get Fleet spun up on like a $10 or $15 a month cloud environment in about 5 minutes on Render, and it'll have all the TLS certs ready for you and everything, and you can map it to a custom domain if you want. Like that's all ready to go. If you do this, you can also build or just use the container images that we have and run the binaries. You can run it completely locally on your machine, and we have docs in our repo about how to do that in the development environment. So it really kind of depends on what level you're talking about. If you're wanting to run it in your home lab, you end up you could just run like a few Docker containers and really just run it in the home lab. But if you want your computers to also be able to connect to it when they're out of the home lab and you don't have a static IP or something like that, then getting onto something like Render works really well. And I guess the other thing that I would say, if folks want to try it, so let me copy this into the chat unless someone else already did.
Yeah, Whit's already beat you to it. You're good.
Oh, great. Thank you, Whitney. The other thing that I would love to point out is I just, let's see, I just published my video from my osquery workshop video from B-Sides just last week, and in here there's a bunch of stuff specifically focused on the osquery SQL, as well as focused on how to use the Fleet interface to do sort of the higher level stuff when you actually have some real hosts enrolled. And if you check this out somewhere right around here, I am actually leaving this workshop server with these credentials open for another few days. So if anyone's really curious, go ahead and do this, and it should all be working unless someone changed the account password on us, in which case I can fix it, but not exactly designed to have a bunch of randos from the internet joining. So we're relying on goodwill at the moment, and then I'm just going to shut down the whole cloud account so that whatever's popped goes away.
That's awesome. Here, I'll jot that link down here in the chat for anybody who wants to check that out. That's super cool, Zach. Thank you for sharing that with us, especially since it sounds like it's for a limited time only.
That's so that z.ach.work/fleet will get you into this Fleet server with these credentials, or you can look at the whole Loom video, which also lets you watch it in double time speed and that kind of thing. And there's some exercises to try out. Like if you're curious, what can this thing actually do? This workshop walks you through some exercises and teaches you a bit about the sequel and all that. So that's fresh content right there.
Zach, this is the way. So I just want to stop and appreciate, and somebody else has already said it in chat. I'm just gonna to echo. It is refreshing and just awesome to see technology companies and founders taking this kind of approach of like, hey, look, like, open source, you could play with this thing all you want, right? Because obviously, folks that fall in love with it, which is easy to do, right, can easily adopt and decide to pay for the enterprise. But, it just does so much for the community as a whole when these solutions are available for students, for hobbyists, for home lab users. And there's just not enough organizations that take that approach. So I salute you for being among the great that do that. And even going even the full mile and publishing workshops and things like that. Like, it's just incredible. So thanks for being awesome, Zach.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really sweet. And I think one of my favorite things ever was getting an email from a guy who's like, my 8-year-old daughter and I have been getting into cybersecurity, and we just put Fleet onto our home lab, and she is loving it. For me, that's the coolest thing ever.
That is killer, man. That is so great. Well, Zach, we're wrapping up here. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you, everyone else, for joining. As you know, every week we'll throw a t-shirt winner in Slack. So be sure to join us if you haven't already at slack.limacharlie.io. We've even got Justin on cam right now wearing his Defender Fridays t-shirt representing. Yep, he was one of our previous winners. So thanks for rocking our logo there, Justin. To everybody else, have a fantastic rest of your day, a great week. We'll see you same time, same place next week, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.